insect populations and bird populations have declined since the dew wars began. The days are gone when one awakes in the morning to the chirping of birds, and one doesn't dare sit in the garden without being sprayed with insect repellents. The loss of domesticated bees is even more dramatic. Here too, no smoking gun evidence exists, or will likely ever be possible, to link these trends to the still increasing depoisoning of the air across the world, except the coincidence in timing. With this considered, it is hard to imagine what a 50-fold increase, or potentially a 100-fold increase may bring. Humanity may not survive such an increased onslaught against itself if it is unleashed, especially in the light of the Ice Age challenge that also looms on the horizon. The Canadian Armed Forces no longer use depleted uranium ordnance. All uranium munitions have been eliminated from the inventories of the Canadian military. The Canadian response to a growing international outcry puts Canada into a leadership position for the world, though the movement towards sanity still faces the near-universal opposition from all the big powers of war, which are the chief users of uranium ordnance. The military of the USA clings to the indefensible position that the resulting radioactive gas poison is harmless, and that the international attempts to ban their use of it are merely intended to blunt its military might. Thus the dew wars continue that are silently killing all across the world, including Americans, in their distant land. Protests are often raised at this point, with people insisting that no government, such as the USA, would engage in warfare actions that massively endanger its own population, and much of the whole world. These kinds of protests are expected, of course, and are answered with denial upon denial. The official policy in such cases is plausible deniability. The worst atrocities are typically hidden under the blanket of plausible deniability, which is often subliminal in nature. Nor will this likely change until a fundamental change occurs with a stand for truth. At the present time, the mass devastation of populations is an ideological objective that has widespread support. Hasn't everyone been taught that the earth is too full, that there are too many people living in the world? We are using up our resources in an unsustainable rate because we are too many, so that we need to depopulate. This intentionally created fairy tale has become a well-crafted subliminal platform that enables the military, and of course also the financier looters of the world, whom the military serves, to have their free reign. For over 200 years already, humanity has been hammered with this ideological fairy tale that the world is too full of people. And this takes us back in time to the late 1790s. The idea of the targeted depopulation of the world has been forged in the 1790s as an ideological counterattack against the enactment of the U.S. federal Constitution that stands as the first commitment in history focused on the principle of the general welfare of humanity and the pursuit of happiness in defiance of property rights and imperial power. The counter-ideology that was bred up in the 1790s declared that the human being is a danger to itself and to the earth under the carrying capacity doctrine. The doctrine was designed to counter the recognition of the creative and productive power of humanity and its fundamental right to self-development. Nothing is more frightening to an imperial world system than unbridled universal human development that would break the chokehold that empires have on humanity. It appears it was recognized back in the late 1700s when the idea of the USA began to be established as the first nation in history formed in defiance of the imperial system, that the human development potential that is lodged in its design needed to be crushed by the masters of empire if the system of empire is to survive. The required ideology towards this end was cooked up by an intellectual servant of the Venetian imperial oligarchy by the name Gianmaria Orts. Ortes fulfilled his task in typical Venetian style. He created a doctrine that instilled the notion that the earth has a limited carrying capacity, so that populations need to be kept small and their development prevented in order that the human herd would not destroy its pasture. Ortes's doctrine was a clever ideological trick, because it is indeed true that without the continuing development of the creative and productive potential of humanity, the earth does become too small at a point to carry an expanding civilization. Thus, the preventing of human development is a form of murder that has become a political weapon for genocide in the modern world. Ortiz declared that the absolute upper limit would be 3 billion people. He was wrong, of course. There are now 6.9 billion people in the world. But mostly he was wrong by not recognizing that without humanity's creative and productive potential, there wouldn't be more than 100 million people in the world today, because this would be all that the natural Earth in its primitive state would be able to support. But we don't depend on the primitive Earth. We create our own resources for living. Only when the chain of our productive and creative development is broken will the Earth become too small. And this is precisely what the complex of empire has been aiming at for over 200 years already, with ever more pressure being brought to bear to hold back the self-development of humanity. The Ice Age challenge that now stands before us might be big enough and urgent enough to put sufficient pressure on humanity to break itself out of the death trap that has been set up for it by imperial doctrine. To date, nothing has been sufficient to break humanity away from the mindset imposed by the imperial dehumanizing doctrine that has ruled for 200 years already. The doctrine is that humanity is an impotent cow that is destroying its pasture. This doctrine has become widely accepted and promoted from the highest levels of empire. The author of the carrying capacity doctrine was a defrocked Camaldolese monk and libertine with the name Gianmaria Ortiz. In the last years of his life, in the 1790s, Ortiz laid out his world-devastating doctrine as a gift to his masters, in a book with the deceptively innocent title, Reflections on the Population of Nations in Relation to National Economy. The book was written in the shadow of the U.S. federal constitution being created that established the first form of government on the planet that pulled a people out from under the throne of empire and placed it on its own feet and its creative and productive potential. The American Constitution was created in 1787. The new government based on the Constitution began its operation in 1789, and in 1791 a major amendment was added that gave the nation its own, clearly defined Bill of Rights. This is the background that Ortiz labored against, evidently on behalf of his masters. His counter-doctrine was published in 1799. Ortiz's doctrine was so greatly welcomed by the masters of empire that it became the center of imperial policy ever since. While the policies built on Ortiz's doctrine did not affect the far-off USA, at its early stage, it could, and it did, enable the devastation of Europe. It forced a new wave of Dark Age thinking that cut deep, which has not yet been defeated, and has in modern time become reflected in the two wars against humanity. In retrospect, the modern Dark Age thinking is not surprising when one considers that Ortiz's doctrine was cooked up in the sewer of one of the most putrid, decadent, and moribund oligarchic societies the world has ever known, that of the dying empire of the Venetian Republic during the late 18th century. Ortiz's doctrine was designed as an epistemological weapon, and as such, it was immediately carried over into England, where the Venetian oligarchy had established itself in the wake of the invasion by William of Orange. Thus the doctrine became the weapon of the largest empire on the planet. It justifies war as a good thing for the effect it has in draining off the excess populations that the doctrine cries about. In time, the carrying capacity doctrine became the heart of the global depopulation policy of the modern empire. The doctrine had been carried forward by such notable figures as Malthus, Darwin, Galton, and Huxley, who had paved the way for it right through to the present day. Many proponents of the modern UN-sponsored genocidal objectives would readily identify themselves as followers of Parson Thomas Robert Malthus, the author of the infamous essay on the Principle of Population, published in 1898. What Malthus had put forward merely contained in a more explicit form what Ortiz had laid out earlier. The resulting continuation of Ortiz's doctrine was carried forward through the entire school of British philosophical radicalism, where the creative and productive power of the human being is not regarded to be the defining factor of humanity, but self-serving liberalism and empiricism are. Virtually everything that had dominated the philosophical scene in Europe, from the 19th century onward had previously been put forth by Orts, who was philosophically plagiarized without anyone giving the sewer of Venice credit for its creation, where it all came from. The strain takes us all the way forward to the 1994 United Nations International Conference on Population and Development, held in Cairo, where genocidal bureaucrats of the UN were conditioning governments and public opinion to subscribe to Ortis's carrying capacity doctrine for our planet. Going into the Cairo conference, the goal was voiced to impose an ultimate world population limit of 7.27 billion, to be reached through forced attrition by the year 2050, using compulsory abortion, sterilization, euthanasia, and other grisly means. Promoting economic development was not on the agenda, as it would interfere with the looting of the Third World. While the USA refused to make the Cairo targets compulsory, the genocidal intention behind the conference is notable, which had been stated much earlier by Bertrand Russell, and was reiterated actively by Prince Philip, of the British monarchy. Bertrand Russell had stated in an article published in 1951 by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists that war is disappointing, as it doesn't kill enough people to curb the world's population. He was arguing that biological warfare would do better, suggesting that if the new Black Plague would erupt in every generation, the population growth would then be contained. Oh yes, he would be delighted by what our modern uranium gas wars, the DO wars, are now prepared to accomplish along the line of his desires. Prince Philip expressed the same desire when he wrote that he is tempted to wish to be reincarnated as a particular deadly virus, as a step forwards towards the same end. He published his wish in 1986. 20 years later, in 2006, in a 45-minute lecture at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, Professor Eric Pianka sang the same song again, only more forceful, to his students and guests, stating that the Earth would be better off with 90% of the human population dead. He suggested that an airborne version of the Ebola virus could accomplish such a task in short order. His claim was that 6.5 billion human beings are too many, and that sooner or later, humanity, or nature, would exterminate all but a fraction of civilization. The genocide-preaching professor got a standing ovation at the end of his lecture. This is where we stand today. We are standing in an ideological trap that we need to break out of, because the depopulation train has been running at full steam for over 35 years already, since 1974, with numerous branch lines having come into service, primarily to prevent economic development by means of genocide. The year 1974 was the year that gave us the global warming doctrine, and at the same time America's NSSM 200 policy for Third World depopulation, from which HIV emerged. The global warming doctrine in turn started the biofuels burning of food, coupled with a commitment to prevent economic development, wherever possible, and deindustrialize the West. Both policies echo what has been demanded since 1961 by Prince Philip's World Wildlife Fund, that was later renamed in 1986, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Thus, in 1974, worldwide genocide was placed high on the agenda. A few years later, in 1991, the first round of the uranium gas wars began, the DO wars. All of these fronts are still active today, and as deadly as ever. The philosophy of depopulation, and by implication genocide, which underlies many of the climate-related policies of empire, was a big factor at the 2009 Copenhagen UN Climate Change Conference. The empire's Optimum Population Trust produced a strongly genocide-focused submission that proudly stated that the cheapest solution to the man-made global warming problem would be to eliminate most of the population. It states that there is not enough land in the world to support a natural lifestyle for the current population, much less further increases. It claims that the footprint in population numbers has already become bigger than the available land and resources to sustain it, so that the world population should be reduced to 2.7 billion people by eliminating 4.2 billion people by the year 2050. This is essentially the same song that Gianmario Orts had sung more than 200 years earlier. However, the entire conglomeration of genocidal doctrines for depopulation, from A to Z, has one underlying flaw, that none of it is true.